Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stop Being Polite, a podcast where we recap all things real world homecoming New Orleans. We're here on behalf of Silent Podcasts, where we are anything but silent, and I am here with my co-host, Kari. How are you? I'm also Katie. I don't think I said that, but how are you doing, Kari? So many things
Hi.
to remember to say.
Hi, Katie. I'm Kari. Now we've both introduced
Yes,
ourselves and each
yes.
other. I am good. It's a Thursday afternoon, which is a little bit later than we tend to bring this
Mm-hmm.
content to the people. But I think it was for good reasoning because we just watched the end of like an amazing Survivor season last
Yes, we
night.
did.
And I think it's worth pushing back our coverage of this a little bit because it was fantastic. Like, if it was last season, given I didn't watch last season, I might have been like, I mean, but the people need it on a Wednesday. But no, if you didn't watch this past
Yeah.
season of Survivor, as someone who skipped 41 for a multitude of reasons, get back into it with 42. Go binge it. It's great.
Yes, it was a great season, a really great cast, a really great winner. It's just kind of like one of those things that works out in all the best ways possible. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we had a 3-hour finale last night, and that's a long ass time. So we were like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what, we'll do this Thursday. So here we are.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about episode 6 today. It's called Spiritual Bypassing. And we get a lot of the Matt content that I think we've probably been waiting for this whole time. His feet do get held to the fire a little bit, but not as much as I wish that they did, but we'll talk about
Mm-hmm.
it. So the episode picks back up where we left off last week, which was in that game called Who Said That? And we leave off on that kind of relatively rude, I don't even want to say relatively rude. It was a rude comment that Matt made about Danny being negative. And we got into like a little bit of a, I guess heated is the word I'll use, discussion between the two of them about why Danny was like that toward Matt back then. So Matt kind of apologizes and said, there's a conflict inside of him and that he'll never understand how God created Danny, and that they were created differently and that he's a broken man. What do you think about this?
Dude, I don't know if it's too early in the podcast to go on a tirade because, like,
We have plenty of opportunities for tirades, I think, this episode.
I don't care that he's a broken man because he has no reason to be a broken man.
Right.
Danny has every reason to be a broken man. Tokyo has every reason to be a
Mm-hmm.
broken man. Matt, you don't, because
Right.
you are unwilling to compromise your religious beliefs with what is evidently in front of you, someone you care about, someone you've cared about for a while, someone who is exposed to you that homosexual relationships can be as good, if not better,
Yeah.
than a heterosexual relationship, but you still sit here and say, well, God wasn't supposed to create you that way. How am I supposed to accept you?
Yep.
This is your problem.
Yep.
And you need to fix it so that God can love you the way he's supposed. Like, what the? No, you're not a broken man. You're a bigot. That's what it is. That's
Yeah.
what it is. And so this is going to be rant number 1 you.
Should we keep track?
Yes, let's have a little
Okay, one down.
counter. So that's how I feel about it. I don't care that he feels like a broken man because I think that is the wrong terminology, and it makes him seem like a bit of the victim here.
Yeah.
Where if I would have respected a little more if he was said like, I'm conflicted because
Yes.
there is better verbiage, whatever, for what he was trying to say, because the way he said it made it seem like, oh, but I'm hurting. I'm the one that's in pain here because I have this internal conflict. Shut the fuck up. Like,
Right. And I think the
no.
thing about Matt that's really important to remember is that this is all a choice for him. And he's
Mhm.
continuously actively making this choice to follow this religion and follow it to a T, it seems, without wavering. And maybe he does feel conflict inside of him because of that, but he's still continuously making this choice to stay within this church and follow. I mean, there's a spectrum of religion, right? Like you don't have to be a completely God-fearing by the book. You could still be a
Mhm.
religious person, but still be accepting. And he just chooses not to be. So I don't know that makes him a broken man so much as someone who's choosing to continue to live their life this way. But okay, Matt, whatever you say. So we do get that a confessional of Danny saying that Matt has changed the least out of all of them, which I think is something that we've been saying too. Obviously, Danny knows him better than we do, actually
Right.
knows him in real life. But Danny calls what Matt is doing spiritual bystanding. So he's loving the sinner, but hating the sin. And that the sin is something that the sinner has to fix so they can, so you can be loved completely instead of only loving a portion of this person, essentially. So he calls it like his very own don't ask, don't tell policy.
Yeah.
And he also reveals that he's kind of at that place with a lot of people in his family.
Yeah, and I thought that was like such a good description of it. And obviously,
Yeah.
Danny has had plenty of time to, and plenty of instances in his life where he's had to think about this and be able to put it in a way that maybe others would understand. But I do feel bad that he's constantly felt like people want him to fix a part of him when like this isn't a choice for him. Like
Right.
he's gay not by choice, but by just being born. Like not to, like Lady Gaga this, born this way, but there's really no other way to describe it. And so I can't
Right.
imagine that'd be like someone telling me to fix my height. Like I'm 4'10". I'm legally a
Yeah.
litk person. I
You
can't do
can't.
anything about it. Do you think
You
I don't
can't.
want to be taller? I would love to be able to have a different perspective, but like I can't fix that in the same way that Danny is who he is. And just to have some people throughout his life consistently tell him fix it, especially his own parents, like
Right.
I feel bad for him.
Yeah, I feel bad for him too. I mean, this really sucks. And it sucks that, seemingly in the media and in other places, it's become much more accepting of people who are in the LGBTQ community. Um, but that doesn't mean that people in general have become more accepting of that. I personally have a nephew and now a niece who my nephew's very young. He hasn't fully come out yet, but he will be coming out very soon, I'm sure. And my niece just came out as bisexual, and she was upset because her dad, who's a cop, was like, she was upset because she's like, Dad's not going to treat me the same anymore, and he's not going to love me like this. And we live in New York, like this is an accepting place, and it just is. It's normalized for people to just not or treat people differently when they don't understand something about them, and it sucks. It sucks. So I feel for Danny here. Danny kind of says, like, this is just a drop in the bucket of a million stories. And Tokyo kind of interrupts him here and says, I want you to acknowledge how hard Matt's fighting. Like, he's fighting inside. And, like, to this, I say, what, Tokyo? What's the fight here? What's the fight?
This
I
was a
appreciate
head
her being,
scratcher.
like, a friend to Matt.
Yeah.
I know they always had, like, a good relationship, him and Tokyo, but, like,
Yeah, of all people for like Tokyo to be the one to say that, like it's kind of crazy. Julie took like a harder stance on this than Tokyo
yeah,
did. And you would think that Tokyo being from a minority community like would have some appreciation for what Danny is going through, but instead is sticking up for the white man who's over here trying to oppress
yep.
Danny's being. Like when that happened, I was like, oh, what?
Yeah, it was strange. It was a strange take. And Danny kind of cuts him off and was like, if I could just finish what I'm saying. He continues to say, like, it's a drop in the bucket of conversations like this that he has had, and that maybe Matt feels like for him he needs to apologize, but like Danny doesn't need that from anybody. It's not his responsibility to make Matt feel better about this like quote unquote burden that he's carrying with himself about how he like likes a gay person and cares for a gay person, but his God tells him that's not okay. What a tough road for Matt.
Yeah, and Danny even says like it's so unfortunate that people with really intense beliefs tend to choose their beliefs over the people they love, and this is
Yeah.
a prime example of that.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's sad. And Danny kind of points to groupthink, and he basically says it's the most dangerous thing in the world, and exactly, what you said, Danny, exactly that chooses their belief over the people that they love. And Danny says that he doesn't need Matt's apology. Matt is kind of like, is there any grace coming my way? And Danny pretty much is like, I'm going to essentially like need to protect my peace and let Danny sit in his uncomfortability a little bit.
Before, because this was in the kitchen a little bit afterwards, right? That conversation.
Yeah.
So before we get into the kitchen, I can't remember if it was out loud in front of the group or Julie in a confessional, but I know we said maybe last episode that this was the most we'll ever agree with Julie, but I
Yes.
actually found a place where I agreed with her more than what she said last episode. And I
Yeah.
felt like it carried more weight because her coming from her Mormon background,
Mm-hmm.
saying something along the lines of like, where did she say it? The love the sinner, hate the sin culture is not okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's experienced it entirely, and I respected her viewpoint here, and
Yeah.
that she was, I mean, on the right side of it, to say it bluntly, that like, okay, Julie, this is one for you. You're only at like negative 4,086 right now, but you got one back on the scoreboard, and we're
Right.
proud of you for it.
Right. And I think even the same when she starts talking to Matt and she's like, you've apologized so many times. And Matt is so like,
Mm-hmm.
well, we need to have apologies. Apologies are important. She's like, yeah, but Danny doesn't want it and he doesn't need it. You've already done
Mm-hmm.
it. Like, let him, he needs he needs everything to change. He needs the system to change. That's what he needs. But Matt is kind of like, I'm not giving up on apologies. And it's like, just actually for once, listen to what Julie's saying. I know I'm never
Mm-hmm.
going to probably say that again, but like, just listen to what she's saying here because she's right. Like, an apology does nothing for Danny. Like, changing the way that you feel and then educating other people who are like you to change the way that they feel would do more than just an empty apology to Danny.
Absolutely. And while we're on the subject of Julie, because Julie was still in the gown at the beginning of this episode,
Yes, yes. Oh,
if
yes, we got
you
an answer. We got an
if you
answer about the
tuned in
gown.
last time, you know that we
And the
brought the
first or
gown up
second
again.
episode or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So Katie had tweeted at Melissa the first time we saw it and was
Hmm.
like, "What's up with this?" Didn't get a response. If you remember during our episode last week, I tweeted at her because I saw that she was tweeting. I'm like, "Oh, maybe I'll get a response." But we didn't get a response until the next day, where Melissa was talking about a bunch of things, and she mentioned how like Kelley had done this dinner and they all dressed up. And that was why Julie was wearing a gown, and she could understand why it was confusing because we saw it like over 2 different episodes.
Yeah.
And then she tagged Katie and I and specific in a
Yes.
separate tweet and was like, "This is for you and Katie," which
Yes.
was
So we're in.
so sick.
And then
And
she
she
followed us.
followed us.
Yes. So it's like, I feel like I've personally made it.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
My number one queen of all reality television of all time just casually follows me on Twitter now and wrote out my name in reference to me. So
like it was
no big
cool that
deal.
she remembered it too, in a
Yes,
way. Like,
very
not,
cool.
I mean, like, she's the type of person that would, so it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Because she isn't caught up in like this second wave of fame that she's getting out of this.
exactly.
But it was definitely because it was at like 7 something in the morning Central Time, and I'm like, "Oh my god, Katie!" And she's like,
Yeah,
"She
that's
followed
what I
me!"
woke
Like,
up to is your message.
so the
Pretty
two of
amazing.
us, yes. So Melissa, if you are listening to this, because I there's like a 2% chance you are, we love you. You're
Yes,
you're welcome
very
to come
much.
on the pod whenever you want. You
We
have an
would love to
open
have you.
invitation,
Yes.
and thank you for the follow. It genuinely made my day that day. There
It's
was
like
a
making my day every day to think that. I
yeah.
like second guess what I tweet now. There are a couple of people who follow me on Twitter. So it's her, it's Kevin from Big Brother Canada, the winner of season 10, and Arissa Cox from Big Brother Canada, where I'm
Mhm.
like, maybe I need to like watch what I tweet here. Because like there are actual people now that follow me.
Yes, I have caught myself already a couple times being like, should I use capital letters? I never use capital letters. Melissa's reading this
Yeah,
and I know she loves grammar. I mean, I love
she
grammar, but
does.
Melissa loves grammar to a level beyond me.
Yes.
And I don't think capital letters are that important. So I have definitely caught myself being like, oh shoot, let's think about this.
Yeah. Same.
So but yeah, I just felt like we needed to let the people know that there was a lot of caps lock happening that morning. We were very excited. Good day. That was a
Yes.
good day.
Yes.
And we
It was
figured
a
out
good
the
day.
gown. Thank you,
Yeah, and we
Melissa.
figured out the most important thing about it is that we figured out the gown.
Mm-hmm.
We got our answer. But in this scene, Julie's still in the gown. But we do get I guess we talked about the confessional with Julie, so we don't really need to talk too much about it. But we got a flashback of Matt and Julie where Matt is saying that there are still a lot of things he doesn't understand about the Catholic Church. This is from like the original season, never before seen footage.
Mhm.
And it's like him and Julie just talking religion. And he's pretty much just like, I still don't understand a lot of things about my religion, but seek and you shall find. And it still feels like he's like still kind of in this mental state of like having things that he doesn't really understand about his religion happening.
Mhm.
But he's just taking, moving forward, just stepping forward, taking the next step without really contemplating like all of the things. And I know we talked about this last time, but like all of the things in life that he's probably missing out on and all of the
Mhm.
relationships and ways that his world could be opened because he is living such a sheltered, scared life.
Yeah.
Sad. Sucks for you, Matt. Sucks for you. Then we get a call with Matt and the producer.
Yes.
Matt's a little bit of a Karen.
I hated
Uh,
this part. Like, and by hated, I mean like I'm glad we saw it because I
yeah.
feel like it exposes a lot, but
Hmm.
it made me mad.
Yeah, definitely some Karen behavior from Matt. So we saw it at the end of last week's episode where he was like, "We're done here. I answered the question." We get a call. They break the fourth wall a little bit, and he basically says like, "I'm done. Like this whole thing is ruthless against the church kid, and that's where this is going." And then they show clips of, how he's been purposely made to be in these situations that are uncomfortable for him with the drag bar, the tarot cards, the conversation about sex, which is like you really can't just be in a conversation where other people like how do you exist in
Right.
life if these are the types of things that bother you? Because these are just normal things that people talk about. People talk about drag queens, people get their tarot cards read, people talk about sex, adults talk about sex. Like you need to be okay with that to like exist in this world.
Mhm.
It's weird. But he basically says these should be like private and intimate conversations with the roommates, and this is not a setting like that. And he wants a reunion with his friends and like no more of this. Just like,
What
okay,
did
that's
he
not really like
expect?
right. What did you expect? Also, you should have watched some of the other Homecoming seasons because like that's not what this show is. They're revisiting everything that happened originally.
And what did he think that they wanted to air? Like him FaceTiming home?
Yeah, like we don't need to see you FaceTiming your wife.
Like what was he expecting out of this? That part was very perplexing to me because Matt's not dumb. So you
Right.
agreeing to this, like my guess is that you agreed for one, the paycheck, and two, then to see these people because I don't think that someone who is so willing to bow out for things due to their like I don't think he just cares about these people. I think it's more
No.
so like, oh, so I could make $200,000 by doing this for 2 weeks. Like, yeah, that's going to feed your family for like 6 months cuz you have a fucking like
Yeah.
elementary school worth of kids at your house. So, um
Yeah. Literally.
it just that part made me mad of like, well, why what did you expect? And then the second part where it's like, oh, you're coming after the church kid and this makes me feel uncomfortable. How do you think Melissa felt when she had to lead a master class on racism and
Right.
2 episodes
Everybody.
ago, or when Danny's constantly having to address how his sexuality has been attacked in a variety of ways from different cast members, including yourself. Like,
Exactly.
and you're complaining about being uncomfortable because people want to go see drag queens and you weren't forced to go.
Right. You didn't
No one
go.
dragged you there. No one is questioning you saying no to things. No one is stopping you from saying no to things. So my problem is like you are getting everything you want in terms of what
Right.
you do and don't get to be involved in, and then you are, I don't want to say being forced, but you're being encouraged to have a conversation confronting some bigoted beliefs that you've had for 22 years and you're like, "Oh, I'm being bullied." Like, shut up,
Right.
Matt. Shut up.
Right. And now this is too much for you. Like, it's about time that Matt gets his feet held to the fire a little bit. And this is like the bare minimum that
Mhm.
is holding Matt's feet to the fire. This is the bare minimum. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to give credit to Julie, but like, look at Julie throughout this show. Like, she's been dragged, rightfully so, dragged because of her behavior. And
Physically, literally,
yes,
figuratively.
physically and literally, she fell literally on her face onto the ground. She's been vomiting. It's basically it's just basically like a little bit ridiculous. Like, and it just goes to show like this is a life of privilege that you've led, where these are the types of conversations that bother you. It's just like it's about time. that you are made to feel like even slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah, when he was like, I want healing and a reunion with my friends, but this is enough. Like, did you expect you guys to just sit around in a prayer circle or something? Like, I don't
Right.
understand what you expected, Matt. I don't feel bad for you, the church kid, because one, you're not a kid anymore. You're an adult. And so you need to take ownership for these just completely, I keep using the word bigoted, but I can't come up with a better prejudice views that you have. Like,
Right.
you have to take accountability for him. You're not some dumb kid anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we move on to tomorrow, and we're sitting outside, and we get a scene about like all the old school technology, and then we get Julie asking Matt about the guest book, which is honestly kind of funny because like we kind of ripped on this guest book when we recapped the first original season. And they show a scene of Matt talking about the guest book in the car, and Julie, I guess, is like talking about it, and he tells her to step off. So she says she felt rejected when he told her to step off in the car, which I'm like, do you really remember this exact moment from 22 years ago? Like, this is wild to me that this sticks out in your mind.
Didn't she say that her husband just watched the show, not to jump too far
Yeah,
ahead?
they probably did
So they
watch the
probably
show and
just
she,
rewatched it like right before leaving or something. That
yeah,
I bet you she has a ton of things like
probably.
of these memories going. But the other reason I laugh at the guest book is because, and they don't highlight this in this episode, which I thought was unfortunate at the time, that Julie pretended to be the girl
Yes.
from the bar and signed
Yes.
the guest book as a somewhat mean prank, but also a funny prank, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that wasn't mentioned, and it was probably for the best that it wasn't, since Matt is so incredibly sensitive about anything that goes against him.
Right.
But don't forget, people, that happened. Julie
Yes.
signed the guest book as the one woman he was ever interested in before his wife.
Yes. Which is pretty hilarious. Yeah, so she basically tells Matt that she felt rejected because he told her to step off. And then she says, she used to have a big crush on Matt. And then she was frustrated that they weren't connecting. And she's felt so many different dramatic emotions surrounding Matt. And she approaches him and is kind of like, what do you think? Let's say we were in a relationship in the house. Like, what do you think would have happened? And Matt, which is like it's a weird question. These are two married people. She had like a schoolgirl crush on him. I don't think there was ever any serious feelings there.
Right.
Like, it's just a little, I don't know, it's a little weird. And he basically is like, I don't think I would have been able to handle a relationship at that time, which honestly is like a polite way to be like, it wouldn't have happened. And she's like, well, I remember, and this irked me when she said, when you met that black woman in a club. And I was like, why are you referring to her that way? Like that, I was like, this is weird. That's a weird way. It's uncomfortable phrasing, but whatever. So we talk about Brandy, and Matt pretends like not to remember who she is. And he's like, my memory is so bad. And Julie pushes him, and she's like, well, you wanted a relationship with her. You were like in love with her. And he basically is like, well, it's just kind of like, we weren't living in a house together. It's kind of like, Julie, just let it go. You really have to let it go. He's trying not to reject you again. You need to just let it go. Elon says, so she went to Jamie because Matt rejected her. Yeah, probably. Knowing Julie, probably, that I'm sure that had something to do with it.
She kind of like went back to Matt at the end of the season, though.
She did.
It was
they
almost
did
like
very
a
briefly kiss.
Yeah, it was a Jamie sandwich in a way, where like Matt was the bread and Jamie was the meat. Yeah, which kind of like fits them.
Checks out.
Yeah, actually, wow, that's gonna be like the most on or correct like analogy I make probably ever. I just peaked.
You just peaked. No, you didn't peak. You got this. We'll have higher peaks. We do get like, then Julie starts talking about how like Tokyo also says like, I didn't want to hook up with any of the girls in the house. And she's like, it's not up to you. It's like, who says that we wanted to, and whatever. And we get a reveal that Tokyo hooked up with a mom and a daughter. And we get a great woo-woo moment. And he's like, yeah, whatever, woo-woo. And I'm like, I miss the woo-woo. We haven't heard any woo-woos in this whole thing, and I miss it. But yeah, we get a reveal that Tokyo probably had sex with a mom and a daughter together.
Crazy shit.
in the house. Yeah.
I
I want to
believe
know
it.
more. Oh, yeah, I believe it. I want to know more. I feel like they also had like the same hair.
Yeah.
It was a strange, strange. So Matt and Kelley then excuse themselves and they go inside and they get very sensitive about the conversation that's taking place outside. They feel like the hookup conversations are weird and they're really hard for Kelley. They're in their 40s and these conversations are inappropriate. They're all married. And I'm like, I don't think we're really going that deep into like detail of hooking up with
Mhm.
people. It's doesn't feel like it's that serious to me. I don't know if you feel the same as them or if you kind of agree with where I'm
Dude,
coming, but it just feels like people talk about things they're catching up from 20 years ago. It's not that serious.
I rolled so hard at this. And I said this last episode because she was the one that asked Julie like, "Oh,
Yes,
okay, did you and Jamie hook up?" Like she if anyone brought up hooking up first in this house,
it
it
was
was
her.
it was Kelley. And then for her to be like, "This is uncomfortable. I don't want to relive who did and didn't hook up." You instigated it.
Yeah, very weird.
I have a lot of eye rolls for Kelley,
Me too.
throughout this episode, and they kind of align with the eye rolls that I have for Matt, which is, what did you think was going to happen here?
Right.
What like, what were you expecting? How is this not meeting, like, your expectations of what a reunion of this show would be from 22 years later? Like, yeah, you keep in touch with Danny or whatever, but like there's still a lot of stuff that you guys can talk about. I don't know. Both like all of it is just so dramatic to me because I think it's like I get you have kids that could watch this show or whatever, but no one is giving graphic detail about anything.
No,
And like if you're sheltering your kids from sex, like sorry, they're probably gonna be pregnant at 16 then. So
it,
just
yeah,
just
it's true.
have the conversation. This is what we're talking about. Adults do this. We were talking about things that adults do. When you're older, if you want to talk more about it, we can.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And
And
then have
it
the
just,
conversation because you're on a TV show.
right. And it just feels like, kind of like before what you said about Matt, Kelly's kind of really getting her way on this show. She's not being forced to be in situations that she didn't go in the bayou. She didn't go to the drag bar. She basically is essentially doing the same thing as Matt is doing, but not under the guise of religion, just under the guise of like nothing.
Of
Like she
writing
just
a
doesn't
book.
want to participate. Yeah. It's just, it's strange. It's very strange.
She's double dipping on the paychecks.
She is double dipping on the paychecks. And I understand that like so the main rumor out there is that they're getting paid $200,000 to be on this show, which is great for them because apparently on the original season they only got paid $5,000 total
Mhm.
to be on the show. So they're kind of just giving them more money because they were so underpaid back then. They're all getting the same amount. And again, this is the rumor. Well, Danny mentioned that they're all getting paid the same amount. I think that the rumor is that it's $200,000, but it's pretty. I think comes from credible sources. Uh, I understand you're not going to turn that down for. I think they're in the house for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
maybe three,
a
and then
hundred
of course
grand a
like some
week.
quarantining. Yeah, it's like you really need to just like relax for a minute. You need to relax. Like nothing around you, especially for Kelley, is happening that's so egregious that you need to
Mhm.
be threatening leaving the show.
And Danny says that to her later
Yeah,
in the episode when him, Melissa, and Kelley are at the park, like having a little picnic and playing games or whatever. That
right.
like there's nothing that's happening here that you can't handle for, as Danny says, a hot second. No one is leaving.
Yeah, it's silly. So then we end up getting a Kelley at home segment. There's literally nothing interesting that happens here. She's just like making her kid a sandwich and walking them to the bus. Like literally nothing interesting. And she's like, "I'm married to Scott Wolf," which like, okay, yeah, we know. Anything to add about Kelly's segment at home? Like I don't really
No,
felt like a nothing
it's
burger to me.
the thing that's like confusing to me, and I don't know if this is a hot take or not. You can tell me the temperature of this take, but um if we were to recast anyone from the original series to this one, like, oh, we're how kind of like they replaced Aunt Viv after season 1 of Fresh Prince
Mhm.
of Bel-Air.
Mhm.
So if we did that with anyone on this show, I would want it to be Kelley by a landslide. Like, I know Julie is annoying as fuck. However, she is providing us as a dynamic character. We're getting
Yeah.
storylines out of her. And I mean, as much bad as she's providing, there are times when, like, we've seen at least two where we're like, okay, Julie, like, I'm actually respecting what you're saying right now. We might even get at least one more plus a bunch more negatives later. I would say maybe one more, and that's like, but we'll talk about it. Versus, and everyone else at least adds something, where Kelley just like,
She's just there.
I don't care that you're married to an actor, and
Honestly,
I
he's not even
don't,
doing anything these days. So
right,
who cares,
I
first of
don't
all?
care that you're writing a book. Like, her most interesting thing right now is that she remained friends with Danny.
Yeah, and I feel like finally we got that reveal in this episode that they kept in touch. I guess we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to that park scene. But yeah, it just feels like, what are you giving me? The only thing I think about Kelley that's important is that I don't know that Danny would have done the show if Kelley didn't do the show.
Right.
So we are getting, I feel like they're a little bit of a package deal. So that's the only reason why I would say like we need her there, because I don't know that we would have Danny there. And I do enjoy like the friendship that it seems like she and Melissa have,
Mm-hmm.
but that's of course just Melissa. And
Yeah.
she's just an outlet for Melissa to talk to. So you could kind of just like slot anybody in there.
We did see, so I sent this to Katie, an interview that Danny did, and we did find out that Danny was the first one they asked to
Mhm.
do this reunion, and if Danny had said no, then they wouldn't have asked anybody else. So I do think that that gave a little bit of leverage to Danny to get Kelley
Yeah.
there, because he also said that Kelley and Melissa were the last two to agree to it.
Yeah. And I don't think we could have honestly have had a season of Real World Homecoming for New Orleans without Danny, because he was such a huge,
Mm-hmm.
huge icon at the time. And so much of the show was about him and Paul back then. And the aftermath was so focused on him that I think between him and unfortunately Julie,
Mm-hmm.
and probably Tokyo too, to an extent. Although I think maybe it would have been almost expected for Tokyo not to come just because of how he was back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the three that we wouldn't have been able to do without. Obviously Melissa as well, but I don't think that she was like the center of the show back then as much as those three.
Yeah.
So we get now Julie's husband, Spencer.
Wait, you don't skip past a very important part.
Okay.
Matt replicating his dancing.
Oh, I have that written somewhere. Oh, I said, why do we get this awkward dance from Matt? Which
It's
is like, I was watching it. I was like, what
it's
is this?
between the Kelley segment and
Yes,
the
it
Julie
is.
husband.
I did write it.
It's right there. It did make me laugh a little bit, but and then they zoomed in on his hips and I felt uncomfortable.
No, I felt uncomfortable.
But the when they show him even like doing the little like push his head thing and stuff, that made me chuckle.
Yeah, it was that was a lot. That was a lot. That was a lot. So we get Julie's husband, and I want to ask you a question. I want to ask your opinion on like, do you feel okay? So we know based on from interviews that we've heard with Danny that the Paul setup was fake. They
Yeah.
always knew that Paul was going to come to the house, and we talked about this in the Paul episode where the text messages seemed fake. Obviously, like this was set up by producers. So like, do we feel the same way with Julie? Supposedly he's in town for a conference.
Okay.
And she was like, I don't even know if he's gonna be able to come, but then he ends up spending the whole night. Obviously, we know he had a quarantine there. So this just feels like a wonky, weird setup to me. And not like the truth as Julie is stating it.
So someone on Reddit went and checked to see if there was an ophthalmology
Oh my God.
conference in New
Shout out
Orleans.
to Reddit.
And I didn't open the article, so I'm gonna find it now. So
Okay.
I can come. Let's put it this way: gut instinct tells me that it's staged. However, I mean, I don't know if they have to stage it though, like because Melissa's parents came. Like, why can't
Right.
Julie's husband come? I guess, but
Right. But
also,
it
like,
just
to make
felt
it
weird.
seem so coincidental. Yeah, like, why phrase it that way? Okay, here's the subreddit. Hold on. My dog is very into this too. I can't mute because I'm on a different page. Just stop talking for a second, please. All right. Come on, Reddit.
Well, while you look,
Yeah, you
Matt
distract
kind
the
of
people while I'm doing
Matt
this.
Matt kind of goes off about how he's like feeling shocked by Julie, and how what a 180 that she's done. And he said, I'm excited to meet her husband to see like who the real Julie is at home. Which I'm kind of like, I'm really surprised that Matt is surprised by Julie because this is kind of always the Julie that I expected to see on the show. This is the Julie that we saw after the show on the challenge. Maybe she's like taking it up a couple of notches, but like this is probably the least surprising part of the show for me is that Julie is a mess. But yeah, whatever.
All right,
Um,
I found it.
okay.
Here's the issue. This guy thought that they filmed in February, but they filmed in November.
They did film in November.
There was actually an ophthalmology conference in February though. So not in
So still
November.
inconclusive.
Yeah, still
Not in
inconclusive.
November.
Yeah, not in November. However, this person did try, and we appreciate you for that.
I mean, I don't know if I appreciate them because we don't care about February. We care about November.
Well, they thought it was in February. They thought it was filmed in February. That's
Well,
why.
they thought wrong.
So new mom help, HALP. You tried.
Sorry. Good job though, I guess. So then Spencer comes and we get kind of like a flashback, not a flashback, but like a scene of Julie at home being like, do you know what TV Guide is? Do you even know what TV is? And I'm like, bro, TV still exists. I don't know why you're saying like, do you even know what TV is? Unless you don't have a TV in your house and your kids have no clue what television is.
Mm-hmm.
She's just annoying. She says that seeing her husband reminds her that she loves her life in Wisconsin. So I'm like, you need to see your husband to remember that you actually liked your life. That's interesting to say. Interesting to say. She also says that she was 27 when she married Spencer. 24 when she married Spencer. He was 27. They were menaces to society back then, because I guess they were elder Mormons that were not married. Elder in the Mormon community, not in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that Spencer isn't threatened by her sexual history aside from Jamie because he knows like that was her first awakening, which is like still so crazy to me that she's putting so much weight into her sexual encounters with Jamie, even like to her husband. It's like, okay, some things you don't need to fully say, but okay. And he comes in and then, they walk around, she shows him the house, and then they're sitting in the confessional room and she's like kind of like laying with him and she has these bracelets on and she says, this is the Red Lotus of Passion. And she says, I wanted to give one of these to Jamie, but then I didn't. And her husband's kind of like awkward about it naturally. And then she goes, Jamie has the best game. Like you would love these games. He's such a good meditation app and he has the best porn. And then her husband's like, what? And I'm just like, what? I'm also like, what? First of all, like, what are you talking about? Did he bring porn with him or is it like on his phone? Are these like bookmarks that he has? How do you know? How did you get into these conversations? Did he show? And she was like, I guess her husband was like, you and him together? Look, and she's like, no, God, no. But like, what?
Okay. When I heard the you and him together, I thought he was implying that like they made porn
They
together.
made porn together. That's what it sounded like. That's what it sounded like. But I don't think that's what he meant.
All of this is just very strange. Like I don't know, if my partner came home from somewhere like and just was raving about this woman nonstop, I wouldn't just be sitting there and being like, wait, so you two made porn together? I'd be like, what? Okay, this is weird. This is very strange. We need to talk about this now because you are fawning over this person at the moment. Like
literally.
This is uncomfortable.
Yes. Valencia says obsessed much, and I agree. Obsessed much? Yes, much obsessed. She is much obsessed with Jamie. It's very strange. To be talking about this with your husband is just such a choice. And then
also, Kelley was talking about like them hooking up in her confessional, but doesn't want to talk about hookups. Anyway.
Right. I know. Kelley's very hypocritical about this. She loves talking about Jamie and Julie hooking up, but does not want to talk about anybody else in the house hooking up, specifically herself or Matt for some reason. So then we get supposedly the couch of doom, as Julie refers to it. And the incoming message is about Julie and her Mormonism. We get a whole segment. I don't know that we need to go deep into what actually the segment covered, other than
No.
like she was Mormon. Um, Julie says it was actually fun to watch and she's happy that she's not upset about it. And then we get a little bit of a deep dive on like Julie now and where she stands with Mormonism and kind of like her history.
Mm-hmm.
So she reveals that she jumped way deeper into Mormonism after she left the show because so many people were like, "You're going to leave," that she kind of went the complete opposite way and just dove really deep into it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was fully back involved with the church when she met Spencer. She met him at church, which they called the Institute, wild, and met him in the singles ward, which I'm like, what are these terms that we're saying here? This is crazy to me.
And it's like those aren't even Julie terms. Those are
No, I know. This is
it's like
like
that's
wild.
yeah, it's so I don't know. It's nuts.
Yes, it's very nuts. So she says, they were quote unquote menaces to society at the time because Mormons get married very young, and she was 24, he was 27. You get kicked out of the singles ward when you're 30. And
Mm-hmm.
then I guess, what are you, just like destitute for the rest of your life? Like, I have no idea.
Dead. You're just
Yeah,
dead.
your knees will be dead. So they ended up staying as part of the Mormon church 8 years after that. And then they cut the cord. They left the church in 2008. They no longer believe the gospel of the church, and that people let the church, pick parts of the church that they believe in, but these religions are creating an unsafe space in the world for people like Danny, people of color, women, which I was like, you know what? I'm glad that you recognize that. At least that's a
Mm-hmm.
step. So good for you, I guess. And then we get Matt again saying nothing could prepare Matt for this 180 with Julie, and that this all really surprised him. And again, I say, like, what are you talking about? In the beginning of the show, like when in the original season, Julie was always kind of like wavering with
Yeah.
the constraints of her religion and like who she actually was inside. That's kind of like what her whole storyline was. So I'm very not surprised that Julie's no longer a part of the Mormon church and is kind of like exploring all of these other things in life. So I'm surprised that someone that actually knows her is so surprised by this.
See, I think it's interesting because I think Matt is just projecting himself upon that belief
Mhm.
because Matt had the same experience as Julie. He went to the Real World House in New Orleans, was there for 5 months or however long it was, and he came back to his religion and has remained steadfast in his religious beliefs. And I think because that was like one of the things that him and Julie really bonded over in the season
Mhm.
was their was religion, the fact that like he went home and still is as religious as he is and Julie has grown out of that. I think it's him just projecting the fact that
Yeah.
like, well, I'm still super Catholic, but you're
Right.
not still super Mormon. Oh wow. When like no, it's just because you remain the same, that you would expect her to remain the same and
Mhm.
didn't really take into consideration any of the experiences that you saw her have or you were involved with, which also just kind of aligns with like he isn't taking into consideration really anyone else's experiences with
Right.
it, like in terms of his relationship with Danny and I don't know, like I think it's a lot of projection from Matt masked
Mhm.
behind surprise.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and you're probably exactly right. So Julie starts talking about her marriage and how typically marriages don't survive leaving Mormonism. Her family is still Mormon, and that this is taking a lot of getting used to from their families. There's deep hurt from her family that Julie and her husband won't be joining them in heaven. But publicly denouncing Mormonism like she's doing right now is like the ultimate sin, and this is how they're going to get fully excommunicated. So I guess I'm confused, and I'm just because I'm not educated enough. Like if they left Mormonism in 2008, but now they get excommunicated from the church, like what's different about leaving the church and getting excommunicated? Like aren't you already out of the church? And this is a legitimate question coming from ignorance.
I don't know exacts. I know someone who left the church. I don't know if they were excommunicated, but um there's things that like he like won't do or say still because of like how
Mm,
deep rooted
yeah.
um being Mormon is and like the secrets of the church and stuff. And I think my guess is that like she's kind of, I mean, because they left in 2008. That's 14 years ago.
Right. That's a long time
So
ago.
I don't know. I guess that maybe they've just kind of been like hiding out, and this is especially because she's a known Mormon. I don't know if I want to say a well-known Mormon, but she's definitely like a known Mormon that um has probably been hiding from it as well, like
Yeah.
as well. And I'm sure her family knows because she's talked about like the hurt it's caused them or whatever, but maybe on like a wide scale. Like I think Utah, you know what I mean? Like has the
Yeah.
news traveled from Wisconsin to Utah? Well, it has now with episode 6 of
Yes. It sure has.
Homecoming, right? So I don't know exactly what it means either. I'm not as well versed in Mormonism as well. I'm really not well versed in any religion, but
Mhm.
I I do think that like it's weird to make this move on television versus doing it within I don't know, the last 14 years that they haven't been Mormon. That was kind of where my question was, where it's like, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like how you bring someone on Jerry Springer to tell them that you're like pregnant with someone else's baby. Like, why couldn't
Right.
you just tell me this in the privacy of our own home? Um,
Yeah.
that was the kind of vibes I got from this whole thing. It was like, why are you doing it this way to create more of a scene if this is already as
Right.
bad of a thing as you are implying that it is, which I do believe it is. But I was very confused by this. Like, and yeah, we're basically like announcing it publicly for the first time right here, right now. But that's also probably Julie's like, I'm making good TV.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely part of it. I think also they probably knew obviously this was going to come up because it was such a huge storyline from
Mm-hmm.
her, her first appearance. Um and maybe, maybe like her family and the people close to her know, but now obviously she has to like address it publicly and let the public know that she's no longer part of the church.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know. But she says now this is going to move her into outer darkness, which is a phrase that we've heard from
Mm-hmm.
Heather Gay
Yeah.
on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. So it's like, some of these like terms are, and we talked about it when we talked about this on Salt Lake City, Housewives of Salt Lake City, that like a lot of this has so many parallels with Scientology. It's like really wild.
Mm-hmm.
But like terms like this, outer darkness, very similar to like a suppressive person in Scientology. It's all very ish. So, I think I don't know if Julie's social media is still private. I haven't checked. I don't know if
I
she's like
haven't
talking
either.
about this at all. I also kind of like don't really care that much, but curious if she's had anything to say about this after leaving the show and how this has impacted her. But I'm also not curious enough to like dig for it. That's just kind of where I'm at. But Kelley agrees with you, Kari, and basically says like this is shocking to her that she's making this announcement, and that it doesn't feel like it's been fully processed or thought through. Which I don't know if I like agree necessarily. I mean, like we said, she's been out of the church in 2008. I don't know that there's really a way around her talking about it on the show.
Yeah, I don't think that it wasn't processed or thought through. I think it was done so that
Yeah,
it would create a storyline, it would create a headline and get attention. But I think it was overly thought through for it to be done this way. My question is just like, why would you want that type of negative attention from your former religious community versus kind of like fading off into the sunset
mhm.
privately would be my choice. But I mean, Julie's always been this way. So um
Yeah,
I do like, and I want to know what your opinion is on this. This was like the one other thing that I was referencing before of like, it might be worth respecting what Julie is doing. Like, she said that the biggest reason that she left the Mormon church is because she couldn't imagine raising her daughter the way she was
yes,
raised.
yeah,
And I do respect that because I
yeah,
do think that um, something as cultish as the Mormon religion
hmm,
is very easy to fall into the same patterns because a lot of times it's all given obviously like Julie had a different experience with the real world and doing
right.
other stuff after, but um making a decision to benefit her children so much so as that is something that I do respect.
Yeah, for sure. And Eric in the chat also says that the Mormon church does a lot of fucked up shit, and he's glad that Julie's bringing attention to it. I'm glad she's bringing attention to it as well. I think, a lot of the things that took place on the show originally in the year 2000, like I didn't know anything about Mormonism. I'm from New York. We don't really have a large Mormon presence here from what I understand. So I didn't grow up learning about Mormonism. She's the first Mormon I had heard of. I think they say on the show that she's really like the first Mormon that was in pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of BYU until Julie. Now, like that's really the only reason why I know what BYU is and that they do soaking, which like I don't know that because of Julie, but like I wonder, whatever. And I think because she played out so many of these like pivotal moments in her life on TV, that it's like easy for her to remember that she had all this conflict in her when she was growing up, and she doesn't want her female children to feel that as well. So I respect her. I really do respect her for that. I don't respect Julie for a lot of things, but I respect her for that.
Sidebar on BYU, and I can't remember if I've asked you this before on a different podcast, so if I have, just tell me, but do you watch the Black Menaces on TikTok? Or do you know
have asked me this?
Okay,
You've asked me this.
Did you look it up?
I didn't look it up because I don't use TikTok that often, and I also forgot, but I do remember you telling me about it.
If you are interested, just as a viewer, listener, whatever, in seeing, I mean, it's 2022, obviously 22 years after Julie was at BYU, but there's a group of Black students who go to BYU. They call themselves the Black Menaces, and they walk around campus, and they'll ask anyone. They'll ask staff. They'll ask just like parents visiting. They ask students, like whoever, the same question for each video. So it could be like, would you date someone who is bisexual? Or do you think that like gay couples should be allowed to date on campus because there's something called the honor code, as Julie mentioned in the original season, and how she like broke the honor code by living with someone of the opposite sex or whatever. And you hear all these different answers, and it's really interesting because a lot of the students at BYU are Mormon, not all, but most. And so just gaining that perspective and seeing the ways that like people also deflect and don't answer. I don't know. It's definitely interesting. If Julie and her experience with religion interests you, then I think that this series of TikToks would also interest you. And I suggest checking them out. No free ads, but here we are.
No free ads. Yeah, I think for sure, check them out. I was also just doing some quick math and research about Heather Gay and Julie and Lisa Barlow to see if maybe they overlapped at BYU. And it is possible that Heather Gay and Julie overlapped at BYU because Heather Gay is 39 and Julie's 42. So part of me wonders, like, did they go to school together? Or like, was Julie kicked out of school by the time Heather started? And like, if so, was that like a big scandal for Heather Gay? Like, I kind of want to tweet her or something. I think she would answer. Also, not to veer too far into Housewives, Lisa Barlow's 47, and I thought that they went to college together. And she said that Heather was a good time girl in college.
Maybe she was on like the Van Wilder plan and was there
for very weird
7 years.
I'm confused, but that's for another podcast. So essentially that's kind of like where we leave off with them. And then we get a scene of Kelley and Matt talking religion in the kitchen. And Kelly's kind of just like asking him some questions. I wasn't like really clear with what she was asking him. I watched this twice and I'm like still confused about what her question was. I think it was something like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, hold on. Before we ignored Jamie's one funny comment this episode when he pointed to the camera and he was like, she's like the Catholic girls because she of like all the revolting she did against the Mormon church.
Yeah.
But he like stared into the camera and said it, and he's like, I'm Catholic, I'm allowed to say that. But when he just like broke the fourth wall and point, I laughed out loud. Sorry, I had to give Jamie his credit.
No, give him his credit.
He's really not that interesting otherwise. So
no, not really.
Am I gonna go see him on June 26th? Maybe. Scott Yeager really wants me to.
Scott Yeager really wants you to. Wants you to.
If you don't know who we're talking about, Jamie is going to be a guest at like a brunch.
Challenge Mania meet and greet brunch.
So Challenge Mania is probably like the biggest challenge podcast because they have Derek as a co-host, so he's very good at connecting people to like
You
being
do a
on there,
ton of
whatever.
events.
Yeah, they do a lot of live events or whatever. And Brad is also going to be there. And so I tweeted, like I tagged Katie in a tweet of like the brochure or the flyer for it. And I was like, should I go? And Scott Yeager replies like, yeah, you should. And then someone else replied to it saying I should
Jason,
go.
also a
Yeah,
silent
Jason.
podcast.
And yes. And then Scott Yeager replied again that I should go. I still haven't bought a ticket. It's June 26th. I have to see.
There's
But
time to decide.
so in conclusion, maybe I'll have more insight on Jamie if I decide to go hang out with him at brunch on a Sunday, June 26th.
I have to wonder what that would be like. I don't even know what I would imagine it to be.
I almost want, like, I kind of want to go and just, like, make a TikTok of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's investigative journalism at its finest.
I know. I need to do it for the pod.
Yeah, you do. It's required. So yeah, in the kitchen, then we get Matt and Kelley talking about religion. I think what her question kind of boils down to is like, is there someone who could join the church that would like change these things and make these things acceptable? Which I'm kind of like, yeah, that's like his name is the Pope.
But the Pope is kind of tried, no?
Yeah, and like people don't like him for it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
no, I'm not like shouting out the Pope or anything, but like I think Elon in the chat earlier at the beginning said that the Pope has accepted LGBT. I was not raised Catholic, so I don't know anything about the Pope or like what he cares about, what he doesn't care about. I don't really care that much about the Pope or Catholicism or religion like in general, but I'm very ignorant when it comes to a lot of it because I was just not raised religious. So I don't really know, but I think this specific Pope is a little slightly more progressive than the other popes.
Yeah, that's a good like one sentence summary of it.
Eric says he's not as liberal as people think he is. Not surprising to me. I mean, he is still a pope.
I mean, yeah, he gets to be deceptive in the fact that he's like, yeah, I'm cool with like the LGBTs but like that's the most progressive thing that he's said. Like everything else. So he has a dot on the liberal spectrum and is probably a bit more,
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still the Catholic Church, and he's still a pope. So I doubt they're breaking barriers over here in the Vatican, But I just thought her question, I didn't really understand. But then like Matt started talking about how there's like two meanings of sex, and there are people, it brings people together for love and intimacy, and also to create kids, and that. Okay, we get him talking about how Catholic people are anti-birth control. And I know we talked last week about Matt being anti-birth control, and this makes me wonder, like, is this him coming out as anti-birth control with his 900 kids, or is he, like, just saying, like, a lot of people are? I mean, obviously, like, they're not using birth control. They have 7 kids.
Mm-hmm. So I took it as a lot. He said a lot of people ignore the component of in the Catholic religion, they're against contraceptives. And because it felt like he separated himself from a lot of people. But I also am very much going to admit that I have been saying the whole time that he strikes me the type of person to only have sex to procreate. So
yeah. And we speculated last week that he was anti-birth control.
I think it's 2 weeks now that we've had the conversation about it. But I think so. Part of me, as I was listening to it, and I only listened to it once, so I was like, oh, I think he's kind of implying that he's part of the group that does believe it, or like that doesn't use contraceptives. But I do admit that I'm listening to it fully biased because I've thought that for a while.
Same. I mean, like I think last week I fully came out and was like, this man thinks birth control should be illegal or something, which I still think. But he then goes on to say that Danny and Paul changed. Well, I assume he meant Paul. He said Danny's relationship. I assume he meant Paul, changed Matt's simple narrative because he felt like they were in a stable, loving relationship. I don't really feel like we got anything from this. Like, I also am just kind of like, what was the point of this conversation?
The part that got me was when he said, religious people end up having to answer questions on behalf of everyone. I'm a simple man and don't represent everybody. And it's like, motherfucker, do you realize? Okay, so in that house, like Melissa had to represent like women of color. And then you had David or Tokyo who had to represent Black men specifically. If you want to say men of color, sure. You had Danny who had to represent the whole LGBTQ community, right? Like,
Mhm.
so for you to sit here and put
Even Julie represented Mormons
yeah,
in
like
general. Like,
that's the whole, like, that's part of the reason you all were cast. You all represent something. And so whether or not you feel like you have to speak on behalf of them, you do, because you are one. And so
right.
Kelley's having an individual conversation with you is just the fact that there's cameras that are going to be airing it to anyone who has a subscription to Paramount Plus. So really, you aren't answering on behalf of everybody. You are able to answer on behalf of yourself, but I think he feels this extra pressure knowing that other people can see it. And to me, that's annoying because I wanted to hear what he thought. I don't want to hear what Catholicism thinks. I want to know what Matt thinks, because I want to know, is there any chance of this second experience of living with all these people, especially Danny, having any impact on how he views the LGBTQ community? And so that answer annoyed me a lot because it felt like he was deflecting. He wasn't. I didn't even feel like he was deflecting. He was
Yeah.
deflecting.
Well, I think the
And
thing is, Carrie, that like Matt doesn't have an original thought because he lets Catholicism formulate every opinion that he has. So I don't think he has an original thought to think. That's the thing. Like, what about Matt is original in his thinking that isn't formed by the church? I don't know one thing about him that's not formed by
the
Catholicism.
closest thing is probably the thing he said next to you had just said, which is that it's Danny's relationship with Paul. That was the first one that made him have any sort of like question or thought outside of these beliefs that he has. Like, that might be the most original thought that he's ever had.
Yeah, that probably is. It probably is. And Eric says he's using the church to take the blame for his shitty beliefs. And I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. And he pretty much says as much, right? Like, he pretty much is like, well, the church, I'm conflicted because the church, but you're not conflicted enough because you're not doing anything about it. You're not changing your mind. You're just saying like, oh, I met a gay person that I like, so now I feel conflicted. It's essentially what Danny said in the beginning of the episode, that, love the sinner, hate the sin. It's essentially the same thing. So we're going to take a hard pivot to Julie and Spencer. And I'm going to say I'm not a prude, but this makes me wish I was a prude, because like, this is the worst scene of television I feel like I've ever seen. This rivals, I know I keep talking about Salt Lake City, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, but this rivals Whitney and her husband having sex at the end. Like, I just like, I can't.
Katie,
I don't need any of this in my life.
Politely, fuck you for bringing that up.
I'm sorry. It's like, it ranks up there. This ranks up there for me with that. It's just like, ugh. I'm just like, I don't know.
That out of my mind. It never would have come across the memory again.
If I have to live with this vision forever, I will make sure that you do too. We're in this together. We're in this journey together.
Isaiah, I'm going to need a replacement.
We'll see about that. But anyway, so Julie and Spencer in the hot tub, and then Jamie comes out and she's like, so glad that like you guys get to talk to each other. And she's like, you don't have to leave. And I'm just like, was she like trying to angle from like getting the hot tub and live out her dream fantasy?
The old Eiffel Tower, the old Devil's Threesome. Is that what it's called?
I don't know. I know Eiffel Tower.
I think that is, but
not personally, but I just want to say that.
I need to go on my phone on incognito mode. But I can't put this one into the public browser. So
yeah, you don't know what it's going to do to your search history.
Yeah. Not at all.
No. And then so he goes back inside, and then we start getting like a really great 98 Degrees Give Me Just One Night Una Noche soundtrack in the background, which like still the music of this series constantly hitting it out of the park.
This and All Stars, Challenge All Stars, like Paramount Plus
in general, nailing it
on the music
and the production value, great production value. So they're like running back and forth, acting like they're little kids, making a pillow and blanket fort outside. And we get a scene of Melissa saying she doesn't know what they're doing, but they're up all hours of the night making a lot of motherfucking noise. And basically they're fucking outside on the ground in a blanket. And we get a lot of like really gross, like, I've been playing with you this whole time. I'm going to vomit just thinking about it. And Julie's like, I'm just going to go into the blanket. And I'm just, I never needed this. I don't want this in my life. I don't like this. Keep it, Julie. Keep it, Spencer. I don't want this.
Speaking of things we don't want, Devil's Threesome is a threesome with two men. Confirmed.
Okay.
Two men,
Okay.
one woman. Because
Okay.
there's two horns is the explanation.
I mean, okay, that makes sense, I guess. Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't need to talk about this. I will quote Kelley on this. This is
Yeah.
uncomfortable. All right.
Yes. Kelley's basically like, this is weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like, all I want to say is like, I just feel like the commitment to making TV is like too much from Julie and Spencer. It's too much.
The other thing I don't understand is like beyond making this sheet pillow fort type of thing is Julie has her own room because Tokyo moved out. Why do you have to go have sex outside? Why couldn't you have done it in your own room?
Because they wouldn't film it.
I mean,
Probably.
no, there's cameras in there because we've seen
That's
the
true.
like when she was on the phone sitting on the bed and like when she was sick in bed and stuff. I think it still would have been filmed. I just don't understand why you need to be outside doing this when you are the only person who has your own room.
Yeah. And we know for a fact Tokyo moved out, right? I know we didn't like see him move out, but the bed is still there. I know Valencia says I could have gone my whole life without this info. Thanks, Slim Shady Katie. I'm sorry, Valencia. Like I said, we're all on this journey together. So if I had to know about it, you all have to know about it. I witnessed it with my. Just be happy you didn't see it, Valencia. That's all I have to say because it was a lot to take in. It was
Valencia, that was perfect. Thank you so much for that. Slim Shady Katie.
So then we do another hard pivot. Well, wait. So we do have confirmation that Tokyo moved out because I know he talked about it. But then they had the conversation, but there's also still a bed in that room. So, like, I don't know. Did they move the bed out?
I mean, he said he would sleep underneath the pool table if he had to. So
it's true. He did seem pretty set in his convictions that he was going to move out. I just don't know that we ever got like a full confirmation that he moved.
I'm assuming yes.
All right, we can assume. I'm happy to assume that. For his sake, I hope that he did. Then we do another hard pivot. And not really, again, not much to say here, but we get Danny, Melissa, and Kelley picnic in the park. And this is when we hear from Danny that he and Kelley, and I knew that he and Kelley stayed in contact. I know that I saw an interview, and I know I remember talking about this when this first started airing, because they give us this guise that like nobody in this house has stayed in contact with each other over 22 years. But like Danny and Kelley, right before the pandemic, or the last like human interaction Danny says that he had before the pandemic was going to Europe with Kelley, and that he's like she is like his sister. So what is the truth? I mean, I think this obviously is the truth, but why do we have to pretend like you guys have not been in contact this whole time? It's weird.
Yeah,
maybe some of them haven't.
Yeah, they don't have to make it seem like no one has. It's okay to like.
Yeah,
I think it's a very easy thing to say that all 7 of them have not stayed in contact with each other.
Yeah,
but a group that big is likely to have pairs that stay in contact.
Of course.
And so like I agree with you that they shouldn't have framed it in the way that, oh, like it's 22 years and no one has seen each other at all. We even like Jamie even said like him and Melissa text every few years or whatever. But I don't know. That annoyed me a bit, but it's fine. Yeah. I'm happy that Danny has someone in his life who experienced this with him and has like remained in contact with him because I think he like went through it the most after the season. And so to like have someone who had that shared common experience, I think is valuable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So at this picnic, we basically just get Kelley saying that she doesn't feel like they're playing some card game and the card says like a decision that you've been avoiding making or something like that. And she basically says like leaving the house. And that's when we get what Danny said, like, you know, no one's leaving this house over like emotions. Nothing is that bad. We're only here for a hot minute. Like everybody's staying, which is true. You're literally getting paid $200,000 to stay here for 2 weeks. Like just sit down and relax. You're not being forced to do anything.
Do you think that this was filmed earlier in the 2 weeks than what it's making it seem? Because like we're in episode 6 of 8, so we're at the 75%.
That's what I was wondering too.
Yeah, to me it would make sense because if you're at this point, if it actually is happening chronologically, which we know they aren't showing things chronologically due to the gown. Again, thanks, Melissa. That I have a feeling that this conversation happened a little bit earlier on. But yeah, it does kind of lead into the preview. Yeah, regardless, it's 2 weeks. Like you can do,
and it's not like Big Brother. Like you're allowed to talk to your family. You have your computer. You have your phone. You can essentially do whatever you want in terms of like contacting people.
Yeah,
it's not like you're locked away from them for weeks at a time. You can still contact them.
Yeah. Stop being dramatic. You can do it, Kelley. I believe in you.
Yes. And that's it,
Yeah.
basically. Then we go back. Spencer leaves. See you, Spencer. Then we get a walk between Danny and Matt. So they walk to the park. Danny starts talking about how Seattle, Matt says, do you miss living in Seattle? Danny says Seattle was really the only place that he felt like, or the first place he felt like he could really be himself. A lot of his friends were there, and he didn't feel safe being himself and being out in Georgia where he grew up. We also learned that Danny rebuilt a progressive Baptist church. The facility was falling apart. I think it was in Virginia. And Danny sold everything that he had that was related to the show, including his iconic turtleneck. And he raised a ton of money, more than he expected. And that allowed him to put a new roof on the church. And Matt is like, you're basically like the patron saint of this church in Virginia. And then he made some comment about, he's like, this is my Catholic way of saying that. Whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
And Danny says it makes him feel good that he's helped an organization. He's not religious, but he's spiritual. And he feels like the core foundation of every religion revolves around love. And the further that we stray away from that is the further that we stray away from the core truth in life. Which I say to Danny, point me to a religion based in love.
Yeah,
and
most
not like
based
money and greed and
hate
for people who aren't like you. Point me to one. I don't know. Again, I'm ignorant, so wasn't raised religious, so I apologize. Don't mean to offend anybody, but causes a lot of problems in the world, religion. So, Matt then, continues to say that he wrestles with his religion. He has a long list of beefs, and, he was like, if you have 6 or 8, like I have 10 to 12 beefs with my religion. And he said getting to know Danny is no small thing for him. Getting to know him now is no small thing, and that he's taking it seriously, and he wants to take ownership of his words hurting Danny. I think it's more than his words hurting Danny. I think it's the fact that he this is his core belief system, and this is the way that he literally lives his life. It's not like you're saying something hurtful. You are active in a community, in a religious group, in an organization that does everything they can to take rights away from people, take rights away from women, take rights away from the LGBTQ community. They donate a fuck ton of money to politicians to be able to give them the ability to do so. Like, this isn't just like you said something mean that hurt his feelings.
Right.
You are a core part. I mean, I'm not saying he's like a fucking preacher or something, but like he's a core part. I'm sure he donates a lot of money to the church, and that money is used for very nefarious purposes in a lot of ways. So it's more than just your words, Matt.
It's the framework he believes in and participates in. And Danny references that in a little bit, which ties back to the original thing. And I do like that Danny is able to keep the same approach of, it's this idea that you participate in this framework and you have a hard time going against this framework that says, like, I love every part of you except for this one part of you. And Danny says he wants to be loved unconditionally, which, like, doesn't everyone. So I do like, that regardless of what Matt is saying, like, Danny doesn't have to change his approach to it, which I think only, like, if there's anybody who is on the fence about this conversation of who they should be siding with, like, validates that. I mean, listen, America's a weird place. So I don't think we really bring in those types of listeners. We probably turned them away about 10 minutes
I thought they made it through the first episode.
Yeah. So but this is where with Matt, he strikes me as like the type of person who it's like, okay, I'm going to vote Republican because I'm Republican, even though I like disagree with these things. You know what I mean? Like this, or like, yeah, Trump might have said something bad about, and then insert like everyone who's not a white male.
900,000 things that groups.
But I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote Republican. It's like, it has same vibes to it of like, well, I love you, Danny. You're great. But at the end of the day, like, I'm still Catholic, so I gotta go with my Catholic ways. And I think it makes him, I think part of it is, I think Matt thinks he's strong for saying or staying so tied to his beliefs. Like he hasn't wavered from them. And if anything, I think that makes you weak
Yeah,
because
I completely agree.
he has had there's people who haven't had the experience that Matt has had, and now Matt's having it twice to be so ingrained with someone and like in this experience who is homosexual, who is gay, that he still like can't bring himself to say, no, this part of my religion is wrong. Like
Yeah.
I think this should be okay. And I don't think that makes him strong. I think it makes him incredibly weak.
Yeah, I think honestly, and I'm not trying to paint a whole picture of how Matt lives his life because I really don't know how Matt lives his life on a day-to-day basis. I think we get an idea, but I think he has this belief system to lean on, which inherently makes him weak because he doesn't have to make one decision for
For
himself.
himself,
He has
yeah.
this mapped out way that he's supposed to think, and that's what he does. If he were strong, he would break that up a little bit and try and understand things and ask questions and get to know people and make decisions for himself. And he doesn't have to do that. He has this framework of something that has made every decision essentially that he needs to make for himself. Every belief system is already carved out for him. He does not have to think about anything. And just because he wrestles with that a little bit, that doesn't make him like a special little flower. What I'll say about Julie, and again, I hate to like say nice things about Julie, I really do, but like she is more so proof of like what Matt is saying, where he's like, well, I really like Danny, so that makes me wrestle with my beliefs. So did she. And then she realized I didn't want to raise my kids this way because this religion promotes hate of these people, and I don't want my kids to hate these people, and this is wrong. Where he's still actively participating in it, but he just says like, well, I like a couple of people that are, or one person that's gay that we know of, so it's, I have to wrestle with this. It's like, no, you're not wrestling with anything. You're not. You're wrestling with it because you think that this is going to make you go to hell. It's not like you're wrestling with it because it makes you want to leave your religion. You feel like you appreciating and liking Danny as a person is wrong based on your beliefs. It's not the other way around.
Right. Absolutely. And so, I have one other bone to pick with Matt. Yeah. I'm convinced that because we've been talking about him and his religious beliefs, at least last week and a couple other times throughout the season, that my my computer has been listening because I was watching one of the Silent Podcast interviews and it went straight into a live mass afterwards. Like, what was the YouTube algorithm doing? I am the last person that needs to go from watching an interview for a future silent podcaster straight into a live mass. Yeah, you did me dirty, Matt. It's because it's listening. They think that I want to be a part of church now. So I don't appreciate that. Thank you for nothing, Matt.
Big oof. What are you doing, YouTube?
Yeah,
what are you doing, Matt?
It's
Matt's trying to convert you.
This snowball or whatever it's called microphone is just like, oh, did we hear church? Is that what you want? We got you, fam.
Church? You just keep saying church? Okay, don't worry. we got it taken care of. Yeah, but I think, you basically covered off on where, Danny wants to invest in people who unconditionally love him and accept him for everything that he is. And he does, come out and say that his parents specifically are the same way as Matt. They won't talk about the fact that he's gay. They love him, all the other parts of him, but they don't love this specific part of him. And, again, it's kind of like the love the sinner, hate the sin kind of mentality that we were talking about, that they were talking about, and that we've been talking about throughout this episode. And he basically says, like, he doesn't mean to reject his apology, Matt's apology. It's just like, he doesn't really, need it to move forward because like, this is the belief system of these people. The words don't really mean anything. And it's his job to protect his peace and live his true self, which, shout out to Danny.
Thing is, this is probably Matt's first time really having to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Danny's had it plenty of times before.
Exactly.
And so Danny knows what he's gotten himself into in this interaction with Matt. And I respect that. And as I'm sure he's gotten good at it, it still hurts in having this conversation. And he even like returns an apology where he's like, I don't really raise my voice often and I apologize. It's like, Danny, you don't need to apologize. Like, he should be apologizing 10 times to you before you apologize once. Shut up, Danny. Stop it.
Right. Exactly. And Matt does say like there's a challenge where if people all stay in their ideologies and only love people with their own beliefs, then they don't move forward, which I'm like, sir, this is what you are doing, but whatever.
Mhm.
And he does say like me and Danny are getting to know each other in new ways and it's fantastic. And I'm like, it's great that like you feel I just wonder if Danny feels the same. I don't think that Danny does feel the same that
Yeah.
Matt probably feels like this is such a great conversation,
Yeah.
but like I don't know that Danny probably feels this way. And like I think this is the first time we really get to see the roles reversed of like Matt has spent his whole time on the show in the original season and even now like letting people know that he's uncomfortable with something because it doesn't
Yeah.
align with his beliefs. And I think this is the first time that the shoe's on the other foot where
Mhm.
Danny gets to say his piece about like why he's uncomfortable with the way Matt is and acts and treats people. And like Matt is made to feel uncomfortable, maybe for like one of the first times in a real way.
I also think Danny did it because he is trying to alleviate tension,
Yeah, I
not
think so
just
too.
for himself, but I think he also thinks of Kelley,
Yeah.
because Matt and Kelley seem to have a decent relationship,
Mhm.
and so um, I'm sure that his motives were also to look out for everyone else, and that's kind of been a running trend throughout this season. Is this cast has been pretty good at being like, we need to squash this.
Yeah.
Maybe not so to become friends forever after this, but more so we have to live with each other for 2
Yeah.
weeks. And let's make this as enjoyable of an experience as we can. And
Mhm.
um, I think that if anything else, that's kind of like where Danny was at with this.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. Now we get to the final moments of the episode. More Jamie and Julie. So apparently Spencer calls and has a little bit of a freak out about a playlist that is now on his shared Spotify account with Julie called Roping.
Which is short for jump roping.
Yeah. Yeah. Um and Jamie's added on the playlist. Okay. So and then like, we get this like 911 call and then Julie goes outside and she's like, "Are you okay? Are the kids okay?" I thought this is where the episode was going to end. I thought we were going to end
Yeah.
on like a cliffhanger. But we come back and then she's sitting outside and she explains what the situation is and she talks about how she likes a band with songs that have one word titles called Bang and Sweet Talk. I need to look up this band. I'll do
Did she
that
say the
quickly.
name?
No, it sounded like she said the name, but maybe they like cut it out of the confessional or
Oh,
something. Like it sounded like they just didn't.
yeah.
Um, and she says that Spencer doesn't understand what the word roping means, which like me neither until you said jump roping, because like
Yeah.
whose mind doesn't go somewhere nefarious with if something's called roping and you have a dude that you credit for your first orgasm in your entire life that you probably still finger bang yourself to on the playlist. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
I wish you would give me a heads up before you said finger bang so I could take my headphones off so it's not like
Mm.
as close to my ears. Like even if it was like just here, so it's like a little bit further away. But go
Mm.
ahead. Keep going,
Yeah.
Katie.
Okay. Finger bang.
Oh,
So
I'm leaving the call.
So I guess Spencer is trying to convince Julie to leave. Some of this I feel like is not real. Some of this I
Mhm.
feel like is put on. Again, I think Spencer is in cahoots with Julie trying to make good TV. I think this is like part of the good TV talk that they had. So I mean, I don't know if this is real or not, but whatever. Spencer's asking her to leave. She says no. Then we get Jamie and Julie drinking. She plays him a song on her ukulele that her sister wrote, says something about Pokemon. I don't know. I was like kind of cringing at it, so I wasn't really listening much.
Mhm.
And she basically is just saying like, Jamie never makes me feel judged. He and I can like play and it's great time. And I'm just like, this girl is like truly obsessed with this man. Jamie is hammered. You can tell he's completely hammered. And he's like, I'm
Mhm.
going to get another bottle of wine. And then starts like talking about how he made out with this girl in Prague. And I'm like, what's the point of this story? You're in your 40s. Why are you talking about girls you made out with in Prague? Who cares?
Mhm.
Who cares? And then Julie says a whole lot of girls made you a good kisser. And I'm like, pause. We need to stop here. This is where you should be like, I'm going to bed. But they don't. And Melissa comes out. I think she like probably sticks her head out the window or something. And she's like, Jamie and Julie. And he's like, what is Romeo and Juliet?
That was
and they're
funny.
probably like saying to shut up. Yeah, that was funny. I would like to know what time it is. I kind of wish they gave us some like editing magic and
Yeah.
told us what time it was. But they're being loud downstairs, hammered. Spencer keeps calling. Jamie's wearing this thing that makes him look like the Loch Ness monster. Did you notice this like jacket thing that he had on? It was
No.
very weird.
No, I didn't.
It looked like he was wearing just like sea slime. It was weird. And she's like, babe, Jamie, and I'm just like, if I were pissed about a playlist called Roping and then like my wife was like, I'm not leaving, everything's fine, nothing happened, I've told you every inch of every single thing that's ever happened with this man, and then you're like, Jamie in the background, be like, I'll call you back. I'd be like, bitch, I'm fucking driving down there right now and I'm dragging your ass out of this fucking house, like this, or I'm leaving you.
Yeah,
one of those two
I'm
things, or
driving
I'm
up
just not
to
doing this. Yeah,
Wisconsin, and I'm changing the locks.
yeah, you will not have a place to live when you get home. This is done. So then Spencer like keeps calling, and Julie's like, Jamie, you answer it. And I'm like, are you actually out of your fucking mind? This is why I feel like this is fake, because like if I were concerned about my relationship and my husband like being upset about this, like I wouldn't be telling this man to answer the phone if my husband's calling me. I'd be picking up the phone.
Right.
It just feels like mess. Danny says like something unhealthy is going on. There's sexual tension in the air. Kelley says this is inappropriate, which I agree. This is inappropriate. They're both married. And I do feel like a little bit like if I were Jamie's wife and I were watching this back, I would probably be pissed because of Jamie knowing the way that Julie like fantasizes about him.
Yeah.
He's feeding into it because he wants this attention, it seems like. But like, this is not okay, sir.
I agree. I don't have anything else to add. I agree entirely. I can't say anything different or better or anything else.
It's just like uncomfortable and very like cringy. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we end the episode. They're still like loud. They're playing darts inside. Danny comes down and says like, you guys are being super loud. This is the first time I think in the whole series that we've seen Julie wearing anything other than yoga pants or leggings. I think she had bell-bottom jeans on, which I was like, these look like they were from your original season.
They came from the 90s box that were delivered a couple episodes
I bet they
ago.
did. I bet they did. You're right. But yeah, that's where we leave. And it seems like next week we're gonna get the "Come on, Be My Baby Tonight" moment, which I'm really excited about. More Julie and Jamie. So we do get a tease of Julie talking to Danny, saying she woke up from a text from Spencer saying that she gets a hall pass. And this is really the moment where if I were Jamie's wife, I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? Like this girl's trying to say like she wants to hook up with my husband because her husband wants to help her make good TV. Like this is a joke. And then she, in the preview, she's saying like the fantasy of having friends after this is dead. So it seems like she's going to make some choices that she's going to just kind of like say, fuck it and just go off. Which I feel like she's been going off this whole time. So
yeah. And we get Kelley having like a panic attack.
Yes. We get a seemingly a meltdown from Kelley, which I'm kind of like, okay, Kelley. Okay, Kelley.
Oh,
we'll see.
Yeah. Nitro's over Kelley.
Nitro agrees. Okay, Kelley. Any final thoughts about this episode?
No, just that I'm glad we got the conversation with Matt. Obviously, like you said, I think he should be held more accountable, but I don't think that increasing the accountability really does anything to Matt, where he's still just going to like blame his religious beliefs. But the conversations had, it seems like Danny is in a better place with it than he was, and that's more important to me than however Matt feels about it. It was a very light Melissa episode, so that's like my one complaint. It was also pretty light on Tokyo as well. So, but like we said, we think we're gonna get the "Come On Be My Baby Tonight" next episode, so that'll be hopefully a little bit Tokyo heavy. But we kind of predicted this, that we were gonna get like a Kelley episode, a Tokyo episode. I think they did their best to give us a Kelley episode. I think we're gonna get. It was more of like a Matt episode, and then I think next week will be more Kelley Tokyo combined. They'll be the two. And then we have like the last episode, unfortunately, until we get Melissa on here and interview her. So
I know we should reach out. We really should.
I don't know how that works, but we'll figure it out. We're smart.
Yeah. I think it just takes a DM.
Yeah, maybe at this point. Hopefully.
Yeah.
But that's
Hopefully.
it. Those are my last thoughts on this episode.
Yeah. Same. All
Great.
right.
So that
Well,
means
Kari,
we're going to be back next week on
we
Wednesday,
will.
day of,
Yeah.
to give you
Yep.
more
No
content.
Survivor to interfere. So we have The World is Our Oyster next week.
Truly.
We can be on any time. Where can our friends find you, Kari, on these internet streets?
I am on the big four, which are my own big four, not the big four. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Venmo at KGD26. And on Silent Podcasts, I am currently finishing up my circle coverage on Alert Alert with Josiane. We missed last week due to some traveling responsibilities, but we're gonna cover all 4 episodes from last week, and we're gonna cover the finale this week as well. So that's coming up Friday and Saturday. We have the challenge being filmed or recorded, whatever you want to say, later on tonight. TJ Hates Quitters. Katie's going to be joining me, so we'll be back. And Naomi from our Top Chef coverage is also going to be joining us. So we're mixing up the crew a little bit this week. And of course, Katie and I are always podcasting about Real Housewives on the Cool Water Show. We have an Instagram now, so follow us. It's Cool Water Show Podcast, I think, right? Cool Water Show Podcast?
Nope. Just Cool Water Show.
Cool Water Show.
At
Podcast
Cool
is
Water Show.
Yeah, at Cool Water Show. There we go. So that'll be Sunday after, or maybe Monday. We haven't talked about it, but after the Real Housewives of Atlanta, whatever time frame. So, just doing a few podcasts here and there along the way. And I have some cool stuff coming up, I think. Hopefully, maybe, we'll see. But that's not reality TV, which it would be branching out of my comfort zone. So
I don't even know about this. This is.
I think I might have told you. But if
I don't
not,
think I know. I knew you were teasing something, but I don't know what it was.
Okay, maybe I didn't tell you then. So, yeah, that's it. Katie, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me on the big, however many, at Real Slim Katie. I'm on Twitter there. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Cash App if you want to cash out me. I'm just kidding. You don't have to. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/RealSlimKatie with an underscore at the end, where play a lot of cozy games, very casual over there, not like a serious gamer, not playing like first-person shooters or anything, just getting cozy and hanging out with the chat. We talk a lot of reality TV there, all the things we talk about here, I talk about there, just unfiltered. Not that I'm filtered here. So feel free to come by, drop a follow. It's free to do so if you would like to. You can find me on the podcast that Kari mentioned already, Cool Water Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Cool Water Show, which is new, as Kari mentioned. Oh, look at this. Wow.
I forgot I added that. Sorry, go ahead.
And this Friday, we will be starting the Obi-Wan podcast.
Woo!
Myself, Isaiah, and Naomi. I'm hoping to also get a couple of guests on throughout the season. It's a limited 6-episode run. I'm really excited for it. All of this art behind me is Star Wars related. I'm a very big Star Wars person, very excited about Obi-Wan. And on Friday, tomorrow, you may see a new interview with someone from Big Brother Canada, season 10, hit our feeds. So stay tuned for that if you're a Big Brother Canada fan. That's really it. You can also follow Silent Podcasts on social media. We are on Twitch at Silent Podcasts. We are on YouTube at Silent Podcasts. We are on Twitter at Silent_podcasts. As Kari mentioned a little bit earlier, we're interviewing some new talent and some new voices. So we're going to have a lot more really exciting, fun coverage from a lot of really great people coming up soon. So we're really excited about it. You can also listen to us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Please feel free to leave us a rating and a review. It'll help us get discovered in the algorithm. So if you like what you hear, feel free to give us a rating. We will appreciate it.
Yes.
So until next time,
unless you listen to us tonight, then
unless you're challenged, we'll see you later. Otherwise, we'll see you next week, or we'll see you on the Housewives podcast, whatever, have a great evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you listen to this, if you're listening later, and we will see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.